It's okay? Study how behavior changes across the lifespan from birth until death. I specialize in the period of infancy. I used to work in a laboratory and we studied infant motor development, how babies learn to control their movements. In any event, Monty was in a couple of my classes. I seem to recall she was a good student. Pretty good. No, she was terrific. Top student. So she invited me to come talk with you. And I thought we'd talk a little bit about evolution, because a lot of misconceptions about evolution, a lot of misunderstandings. And just generally consider that in any animal species, there is, of course, genetic diversity. There are genetic differences among the members of the species. Now, some genetic traits offer advantages in terms of survival and reproduction. Some traits will allow individuals to be more likely to survive and to reproduce and to thereby send their genes off into future generations. Now, if genetic traits continue to offer advantages in terms of survival and reproduction, then they'll become part of the entire species. And this is called natural selection. This is how evolution works. Now, over long periods of time, natural selection results in new species. This is called speciation. And another misconception about evolution is that it's commonly believed that humans descended from apes. This is not true. Rather, humans and chimpanzees have a common ancestor that goes back 6 million years. And indeed, we share about 98.4% of the same DNA with chimpanzees. We're astonishingly alike chimps in behavior and thinking and caregiving. Now, most people know that genes provide instructions for building a body. Everyone knows this. They actually code for manufacture of proteins by cells. But a lot of people don't know that genes also influence our behavior. In other words, we evolved to behave in ways that increase the likelihood that we'll survive and reproduce. Genes have sculpted our thinking and our desires and our emotions and our parenting. So I thought we'd talk first a little bit about how genes influence our emotions. Beginning with the emotion of disgust. All of us have had this experience of disgust. Typically, it's triggered by things like particular sights and smells and tastes. Things like, we all know this, saliva and blood will elicit a disgust response. Oh, poor hygiene, signs of infectious disease, some organisms like cockroaches and fleas, rotting food. It's all disgusting to us. Now, sorry.
Sorry. Can we ask questions?
Oh, of course.
You asked about genes as emotions, correct? Like when you say criminals, are there genetic DNA broken down? Is it passed on? Or is it emotions? Emotions, is that within that category?
That's a fascinating question. We have evolved with brain centers that are involved in aggression. We have evolved to be aggressive. Indeed, all mammals have. Now, when you look at what separates a criminal from a non-criminal, the answer seems to be in part genetics. Now, how do you know this? This is, scientists know this because of the study of adopted children. If adopted children's biological parents, whom they've never met, have a criminal history, they're more likely to be criminals than if their biological parents, whom they've never met and who have not raised them, are non-criminals. Yeah, so it suggests that indeed there's a genetic propensity to criminality. The other interesting thing is that if you're part of an identical twin pair, I don't know if any of you have an identical twin. Identical twins are fascinating because they're natural clones. They share 100% of the same genes. Now, if identical twins right after birth are adopted into different homes and they've never met one another, if one's a criminal, the other one's likely to be a criminal too.
Yeah, but I guess based on what he said, sometimes this situation, this special case, it could be modified. Because even for the genes itself, sometimes there are other certain factors in the society or in the environment itself, it could influence a certain thing to appear.
Absolutely. Genes and environment always have collective influences on behavior. It's not one or the other. And indeed, genes influence the environment influences how genes are expressed. So genes create propensities for behavior. They create likelihoods, but they don't determine behavior. It's a mix of environmental influences as well. Yeah, exactly. We're not born to be criminals. I don't want to give you that impression. But some people are a greater genetic likelihood to become criminals. Yep. Well, in any case, with respect to disgust, as I said, we've all had this experience. Disgust results in avoidance behaviors. When something's disgusting, you just want to get away from it. Now, this is clearly adaptive. It obviously helps us survive because it helps us avoid infectious disease and parasites and poisonous foods and so on. So it's adaptive. It's an evolved emotion that obviously helps us survive. Hello. Related to this, there's another evolutionary adaptation. It's called taste aversions. I'm sure all of you have had this experience as well. If you eat something and then 1 to 6 hours later you become sick, maybe you feel dizzy and you throw up or so on, you can have a permanent aversion to that food. For the rest of your life, that food may be unattractive to you. Now, today, obviously, our food supply is inspected by the government. When you go to the Sultan Center, you always assume the food's safe to eat. But imagine you go back a couple 100,000 years, all of us are hunter-gatherers. You're wandering around trying to find things to eat. If you eat something that's poisonous, you don't want to eat it again. So we've evolved this psychological mechanism called taste aversions, whereby you eat something for the rest of your life that may appear unattractive to you. Consequently, you won't eat poisonous foods again. Anyone have taste aversions to anything?
Yogurt.
Oh boy.
I had a bad experience when I was like 17 years old.
You got sick?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's too bad. That's. By the way, during pregnancy, when women get pregnant, disgust responses and taste aversions intensify. They get much stronger. And this, of course, is called pregnancy sickness. I don't know if anyone here has children. Oh, you do? Did you have pregnancy sickness?
Yes, for 6 months. Yes.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
That's too long. Normally, it's only for about 3 months.
Yeah. I had it for 6 months. Like twice often.
Yeah, lots of women, actually about 85% of women get pregnancy sickness. And women have always sought out remedies to try to alleviate the symptoms of pregnancy sickness. Interestingly, though, it's probably an evolved adaptation as well. It compels pregnant women to avoid eating foods that are potentially high in what are called teratogens. And these are chemicals that can damage the embryo or the fetus. Now, if you ask women, if you don't mind, what foods made you sick? Do you recall?
Everything.
Really?
Yeah, I couldn't eat anything. Just even the water makes me sick.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
That's intense.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
You must be an exception.
I was.
Most women say that meats make them sick when they're pregnant. Now, meats are interesting because they contain toxins due to bacterial and fungal decomposition. Now, as adults, we can tolerate these levels of toxins perfectly well, but they may be harmful to the fetus. Consequently, During pregnancy sickness, women tend to avoid these foods. They tend to avoid other foods which also can be harmful, like Brussels sprouts, I don't know the Arabic word for this, cabbage, some vegetables. So it's another interesting take on a behavior long assumed just to be kind of a physiological byproduct of pregnancy, but which is probably evolved. It's adaptive. It helps us produce healthy, viable children. What else is interesting is that our evolved behaviors, which, by the way, modern humans, Homo sapiens, have only been on the planet about 300,000 years. We have not been here long. Behaviors that we evolved hundreds of thousands of years ago may be quite maladaptive in the modern world. The environment today is very different than the environment, say, 200,000-300,000 years ago. For instance, for most of human history, we've faced periods of food scarcity. Normally, in human history, we didn't have enough to eat, and we had long periods of time when we'd have to fast. Now, consequently, when we encountered high-calorie foods, it's beneficial to consume a lot of it and store that energy, anticipating that there'll be another period of fasting in the future. This was adaptive 100,000 years ago. In the modern world, we always have access to high-calorie foods. And this is not good, because we have evolved to consume lots of these foods. And hence, you see an obesity epidemic globally. Certainly Kuwait, the United States, Qatar rank among the top of the global charts in obesity. We have evolved to consume lots of high-calorie foods. It's not adaptive in the modern world. It was adaptive back when food was scarce. Of course.
When you brought like high-calorie foods, would it just be like more targeted towards like say sugars, or just in general? Because today the access to sugar is probably more dangerous than any other food group. So.
Sugars are high-calorie, of course. Sugars and fats. We love these foods. That's the problem. Yeah. Exactly. Just some other examples of how our evolutionary past is not adaptive in the modern world. If you ask people what they're afraid of, they say things like, well, I'm afraid of snakes and spiders. I assume lots of you are afraid of snakes. And insects. These were threats to us 100,000 years ago. And consequently, we've evolved to be predisposed to fear these objects. In the modern world, they're not really threats to us anymore. Most of us haven't encountered a snake or when we're crossing the street. We're not afraid of things today that we should be afraid of. We're not afraid, for example, of automobiles. We should be terrified of cars. These represent real threats to our safety and well-being, but we're not predisposed to fear these things, particularly in Kuwait. We should be afraid of cars. I think driving here is more hazardous than any place else in the world. I'm terrified. I'm scared of cars. We should be afraid of smoking, but we're not. We should be afraid of high-calorie foods, but again, not afraid of these things. So again, our evolutionary past isn't necessarily adaptive in the modern world. Well, I had some slides I was going to show you. It may be a little difficult to discuss some of these items. I thought we'd talk a little bit about parenting and children and how caregiving has evolved. Babies and infants have probably evolved behaviors which elicit caregiving from adults. Babies have to solve a very important problem. They have to maintain the attention of caregivers if they want to survive. And consequently, they've evolved behaviors which seem to elicit caregiving from parents, and parents have evolved in turn to respond to these signals. Now, one behavior that babies exhibit is crying. Babies cry, of course. Crying turns out to be more interesting than you may think because babies cry at sound frequencies, at pitches at which the adult ear is maximally sensitive. You've all been around screaming babies. It's terrible. And that's no mistake. This is how infants assure that they get our attention. Imagine if they didn't cry, you just put them off in a corner and leave them alone and forget. Sorry?
That's cool.
It's not cool. It's cool.
Professor, is it true that if the baby cry and each time you respond he's going to cry more and more for your attention? Or should you just ignore him for a bit so you get used to it?
Yeah, that's a common belief that every time a baby cries, you go up and you attend to the baby. This just reinforces the crying. It encourages the baby to cry more. That's wrong. There have been studies on this. Parents who immediately respond to crying babies, overall their babies cry less. Yeah, so if you have a child someday, don't just ignore.
All the attention.
Yeah, exactly. Adults, when they hear screaming babies, you've all been trapped on an airplane, you got to scream. Studies find that particularly mothers, their heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, it creates a stress response, and it creates what's called a milk letdown response. It creates a physical urge to nurse. So it seems that mothers have also evolved to respond to these signals. By the way, mothers and fathers, mothers probably have a biological advantage in early child care. I don't want to reinforce stereotypes. Fathers can raise babies as well. But mothers seem to have some advantages. For instance, babies produce different types of cries to signal their need states, what they need. Women, more so than men, are better able to identify what the infant needs based upon the cries. Men just don't seem to be particularly good at this. Now this is true even if you look at women who have never been exposed to babies. They're still better at identifying the need states of the infant. So they have some advantages, at least in early child care. Women, by the way, in general, better at identifying the internal emotional states of others based upon their facial expressions. Men are not particularly good at this. This is what makes women so angry at men. Don't get me started on this one. Well, let's see. There's another emotion that evolved that is very adaptive for survival of humanity. We've evolved an emotion called attachment. Now this is a powerful emotional bond. I'm going to use the word mothers. Fathers are attached to their babies too. Powerful emotional bond between babies and the mother. Attachment compels mothers to protect and care for their babies and compels babies to seek out the caregiving of the mother. In other words, it keeps them in proximity to each other. It's a very powerful driver of behavior, and indeed, women are well known to give their lives to protect their children. I mean, they'll sacrifice their own life. Now, attachment is found in other mammals too, but not all mammals. Mammals that can only reproduce infrequently have evolved attachment. And that's because any given child represents a big genetic investment. Humans, of course, can only reproduce infrequently. It's true of all primates. Consequently, and we have very long periods of caregiving as well. A child is a big genetic investment for humans. Not so for other mammals. Some mammals give birth to big litters, 12, 14 pups. They provide very short-term care. Most of the pups are going to die, but the animal doesn't care. It'll just have another litter. Not true with humans. Therefore, we have this powerful emotion, which ensures that we protect our offspring. I wanted to show you some pictures of cute babies. Unfortunately, I can't do so. Can anyone tell me what's cute? What is cuteness?
Smile.
Yeah, smiles.
Sometimes people, they define it in a different way. Maybe even it's based on the culture itself. But nowadays, like, people tend to call that like the mild way of dealing with people. So someone will tell you, you are really very cute. And but really, it's like generally it's more attached with babies, especially on social media. Sometimes people, when they share certain pictures and even videos for babies, so they will see them smile and laugh. So people just say very cute, or doing certain activities, the babies. So they will tell them cute, but for the matures, it's like the mild way of behaving with people.
Exactly. Yeah, cuteness generally, these are just facial features which signify juvenile status. Facial, sorry?
Like eyes
Right.
and like cheeks. Right?
Cheeks, right. Yeah, cute. Big eyes, big head, disproportionate, babies have big heads, disproportionately large heads, little chin, not yet been affected by testosterone, high-pitched voice, little nose, cute. Now, what kind of emotions do you have when you see a cute baby? You want to eat it? Yeah, that's true. This, by the way, is called cute aggression. Do you ever have the urge just to smash something that's cute? I know. No one understands why we have cute aggression. Anyone else? What kind of emotions do you have when you see cute babies?
Squeeze your the kid's face.
You need to work on this. If you ever have a child, yeah. Yeah, cute facial features seem to elicit a kind of emotional reaction in which you just want to pick it up and hold it and protect it. So, again, adults have evolved to respond to neonatal facial features with caregiving behavior. Infants are, again, eliciting caregiving. Now, interestingly, mothers say that they love all their children the same. This is absolutely a lie. It's not true. There have been observational studies of this, and mothers who have cute babies, they pick them up more often, hold them more often, and talk to them more often than mothers with less cute babies. It's terribly unfair.
Yeah, but so it's easy, you can tell which one is her favorite. Like even when mom says like, I love you all the same, I was like, it's not true. I know who's your favorite. It's easy.
They all have favorites.
Yeah.
Normally it's the cute kid.
Which, do you mean I'm not cute?
Oh my gosh. Adults can be cute too, right? Adults can be cute. They can have childlike facial features. And when they do, people tend to think that they're immature and they're needy and innocent, and that may not be their personalities at all, but we kind of ascribe these childlike traits to them. By the way, other juvenile mammals can be cute too. Kittens, for example. Kittens have disproportionately large heads, the snout's not yet extended, their vocalizations are high-pitched, and they tend to elicit caregiving as well in humans. It's strange. We've selectively bred dog breeds. We've created dogs which are totally unnatural to look baby-like, by the way, and be cute. I used to have a graduate student years ago, and she had a dog breed. It's called a Shih Tzu. Have you heard of this? Oh, they're strange dogs. They have perfectly round heads, big eyes, and they look like babies. And they have very short legs, so they're helpless. And she would carry it around like a baby. And that's what it was. It was a surrogate baby. These animals have been bred to replace real babies. Well, I thought we'd talk a little bit about something that evolutionary psychologists have studied extensively, and that is human mate selection. How do we select long-term reproductive partners in an effort to enhance our reproductive success? That is the likelihood that we'll produce healthy, viable children. This may sound a little strange, but there was a psychologist. He went to 37 different societies all over the planet, and he asked men and women to rate the importance of different characteristics that they look for in their potential long-term reproductive partners, their potential husbands or wives. Strangely, everywhere in the world, people tend to look for similar things. So, for example, let me ask you, what do women look for in men when making decisions about a spouse, a husband? They like tall guys. That's a fact.
Maybe mind.
Sure. You want someone who's intelligent? Is that what you mean?
No, it's just for the mind, for the man.
Yeah.
Good education.
Good education, of course.
Health, appearance.
Health.
Must be a healthy man.
Ah, now we're getting somewhere.
What did he say? Can you repeat it? Rich. Status.
I don't mean to, again, reinforce stereotypes, but psychologists have discovered everywhere in the world, with no exceptions, across all racial groups, all ethnic groups, all religious groups, women are more concerned that their spouse have resources, money, or have the capacity to acquire money than men. Men are not as concerned about this. This is strange. This is true everywhere in the world. There are no exceptions. Women are more concerned about money. Now, because it's found everywhere in the world, that suggests that women may have a genetic or biological propensity to look for these things. In other words, you would assume if this is learned, you'd find some culture somewhere, maybe in New Guinea, where this is not true. But it appears to be true everywhere. Why do women look for money? What's so good about...
Safety. Security.
Yeah. Definitely. As you know, women are responsible for gestation, carrying the fetus. During the time, they're not going to be particularly productive. Their labor is going to be reduced. And in every culture in the world, with no exceptions, women are responsible for the majority of early child care. There are no exceptions to this either. So, as a woman's caring for a child, she's not going to be productive either. She's not going to be contributing to the labor of the family. So, perhaps women have evolved to look for money so that this can be invested in her and her child, as you said, for security reasons. This is just a theory. What about women who are rich? A good-looking guy. The women who are rich, do they look for men with money?
Not always.
Not always, of course.
That is based on their own age. Sometimes if they reach a certain age where they cannot find a man for themselves, definitely the money is not going to be number one priority for them. Definitely
So
they would look
true.
for a man only. So the more they just tend to be more older, so their own the standards of finding a man is going to be reduced. It's not that higher.
That's true. Speaking of older, do women prefer older men or younger men?
Older.
Is that true everywhere in the world? It is true everywhere in the world that psychologists have studied. Women prefer older men. Again, implying that's part of a woman's genetic propensity to prefer older men. You find exceptions to this, of course. Individual exceptions, but not exceptions in different societies. Why do women prefer older men? What's so good about older men?
More mature. Experience. Bonus.
What else?
I think from my opinion, there is missing from the woman, she found it in the man. Or sometimes it's not the same presented in the man, in the woman, like emotion and mind. There is two things in the human. The women have emotion and mind. So she think about the mission more than mind. Okay, so she need mind, opposite of the man. The man think from his mind. I think the present, as the search, 60% 60%. The man think about his mind, not his mission. So the man need the heart of the woman, and opposite the woman, she need the mind. This is the main matching for the woman and man. I think for mind, not for money, not for anything else. Just she need the mind for the man, and he need the heart of the woman.
I see.
Heart. I think.
Well, that's a good theory as well. Most evolutionary psychologists who study this believe that one reason women perhaps prefer older men is older men have had more time to acquire resources. Typically, they have more than younger men. This is just speculation, of course. Speaking of which, do men prefer younger women or older women?
The younger the better.
Oh boy, I didn't want to go down this road. Younger, right?
No, they prefer a bit.
Oh no, this. We're way off topic here. I'm sorry about that. Oh boy. Generally, women or men prefer younger women, do they not? This is true everywhere in the world, every culture ever studied. Why do they like younger women?
First experience. She have first experience in love. Maybe she have more age. I think the woman search for the love. Yeah, some. Okay.
More time to produce.
Right.
And easier to be controlled.
Not that only, but also we could just take it in other way. Is that like they need a younger woman, especially when they will get older. They need somebody who's really able to take care of them well. Yeah, but for men, in order to choose like a younger woman, sometimes I think it's the based on the person himself. Why? Because if you cannot handle her very well, definitely you will get depression or whatever. Because according to her own age, she may not be that person who can have kind of discussions or even to understand you very well, because she's immature.
Okay, so I have a question. Why some people find it very weird, like for a girl to be with a guy who's like older than her with 10, 15 years? Some people find it very weird and offended.
Well,
I think it's like a choice of society. I think in other societies it's normal. In other societies it's trained for property.
I don't think so, because regarding this, Professor, I was like searching online for like random couples videos and all that. There's a girl who she was like 20 something with a guy who's like 50, and they called her a gold digger for that, just being with him. And even though he said like, I don't have any money, I'm not giving him anything, even like money and all that. Still like she finds some comments in her YouTube channel calling her a gold digger, even though she works and she's not getting him from all that money they are telling them. So why some people find it very, very strange?
Well, that's a good question. That's a common judgment of women who have significantly older husbands, that they're with him for the money. I don't know why that's true. I don't know if that's why women are generally with much older men.
Even it's not about the money. They calling her why being with that guy.
I suspect.
They're strange.
I would suspect in Kuwait you would be more likely to find large age differences than in other societies. I don't know about Kuwait, but in the United States, age differences between spouses of 8 years or more are a very good predictor of divorce. I imagine that's true here as well. Greater age differences more likely to be end in divorce. Sorry?
The relationship there like more stable with being an older guy in Kuwait.
Is that so?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So we mentioned that every society in the world ever studied, women prefer a spouse with more money and they prefer an older age. Interestingly, in every society on the planet, men are more concerned about physical attractiveness than women, although women are concerned about this as well, make no mistake. Now, there are cultural differences in standards of attractiveness. The standards of attractiveness in Kuwait, by the way, profoundly different than the United States. It's one of the first things I noticed. But there are also universal standards found everywhere in the world, like clear eyes, clear skin, good muscle tone, absence of disease, other features as well. Why do men look for attractiveness? You probably haven't thought of this, but attractiveness, these are just markers, biological markers of reproductive fitness, the ability to have healthy children. And consequently, a man can maximize his reproductive success by selecting a woman who has features considered attractive. I know this sounds rather peculiar. Speaking of which, one of the most important features of attractiveness is called bilateral symmetry. I bet you haven't thought about this. And this means that the left half of the body is the same as the right half. We love symmetry. It's the most important component of attractiveness. Why do we like this? Well, if someone is symmetrical, this indicates the absence of, say, genetic mutations or microbial infections or parasitic infection. Symmetric people live longer. They have better mental health. They have higher intelligence test scores. And it seems that that's why we love symmetry. And symmetry confers reproductive advantages not just in humans, that is, symmetrical humans more likely to have healthy children, but in lots of animal species. Symmetric individuals more reproductively successful.
So all people look symmetrical.
Sorry?
All people look symmetrical.
Really?
Yeah.
I had some pictures to show you of asymmetrical people. Yeah, you can notice immediately in the face in particular.
Professor, do you mean deformities? People with deformities?
Deformities create asymmetry.
Oh, I see.
For example, like some people have smaller ears than regular, like even a lazy eye could be asymmetry, just an example of that. So
That's right.
it's very, very physical. People have bigger bodies, like has a small neck but a broad chest, it doesn't look presented like a pattern.
Exactly. We love symmetry. We incorporate it into our art and our architecture, and We find it attractive. We find it attractive in other individuals and in our physical world as well. We probably evolved to look for symmetry. Strangely, I know this is getting a bit off topic, studies have found that symmetrical men smell better to women. Women find their smell better than asymmetric men. It's strange. By the way, symmetric women smell better to men as well, so it seems to work both ways. Your ponytail's symmetric. As we age, we lose symmetry, by the way, and this is one reason why youth is considered more attractive, physically attractive in any event, than older age. Well, anything you'd like to discuss? That's all I had for you. Oh yeah, sure.
I have a question going back earlier to the beginning of the talk. We talked about like aggression and the criminal gene of people who are criminals. Would you say what percentage of the environment, like say you had an aggressive child, you putting him in a safer environment, a calmer environment, will it help reduce that aggressive gene or in a chance, say, reduce criminality versus children, like just like, you know, say from the movies, you had children in foster care or grew up in aggressive homes or broken homes.
Right.
Would they tend to be more aggressive at a later age? Follow-up question, what is to say from your background, an age group, like is it 12, 6? What is the safe area for a child to develop such genes and compromise?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Aggression and indeed all mental illness shows some degree of heritability. In other words, people are born with a particular vulnerability to schizophrenia and depression and anxiety disorders and aggression. They don't necessarily express these mental illnesses, however, unless they're in homes characterized by severe stress. So indeed, the home environment can reduce the potential for all mental illness. By the way, all psychological traits are partly due to genetics, like how intelligent you are. Most people think that that's largely a result of your parents, but in fact, it's highly heritable. It seems that about 60% of intelligence is due to genetics, 40% due to environment.
On that question, like people say, if your mother's smart, you're going to be smart. You get your smart gene from your mother, or is it your father, or is it just like, is that not a true fact?
No, mothers and fathers contribute equally to the genetics of their children. Yeah. Personality. Most people think personality is learned. In fact, it's highly heritable. This has been demonstrated by the study of identical twins. It's strange, if identical twins, as I said, are adopted into different homes right after birth, they've never met one another, they're astonishingly alike. Similar personalities, they have similar lifespans, they die at similar ages, similar rates of mental illness, they marry similar spouses. Isn't that strange? Who you marry seems to be genetically influenced. They have similar hobbies, they go in similar professions. Here's what else is strange. They have similar degrees of religious belief. How religious you are seems to be partly genetically determined, not determined, influenced. Most people would find that quite surprising. Yeah.
Intelligence is inherited. 100, maybe less than 100 years ago, quite all people, like maybe like very recent people are getting like a good education and all that. Today, most people have at least bachelor, but maybe 20 years or 30 years ago, they don't. Most of them they don't have. So how it's like gene is inherited?
Yeah, I think this is largely due to the availability of higher education. It's not that the genetic intelligence has improved; it's that we have more access and more wealth, of course. In fact, intelligence has been improving over the last century. This is probably due to better medical care, better nutrition, better access to education. We're getting smarter. It may not seem so. Yeah.
How far can we blame genetics for our actions?
Not at all.
It's not an excuse.
If someone has autism, they're not responsible for their deficits. But if someone commits a crime, even though you may have a genetic propensity to criminality, you still have free will. You still make your own decisions. Consequently, you have to hold these individuals accountable. So I would say for most psychological traits, you're responsible. That's not true of mental illness, but it's true of social behavior.
I didn't get the last one.
Mental illness like depression and anxiety disorders are highly heritable as well. If your parents suffered from mental illness, you're much more likely to, even if you were adopted away from your parents after birth. But with respect to behaviors like criminality, you still make decisions about how to behave. And you can't use genetics as an excuse per se. Now, that needs to be qualified, because there are people who have interesting forms of brain damage which seems to result in criminal conduct. There are famous cases of individuals who have developed brain tumors adjacent to a structure called the amygdala, which is responsible for aggression. And they've acted out aggressively. Later, when the tumors were surgically removed, they became perfectly normal. So in that case, I would tend to overlook their criminal behavior.
I will affirm to what you said regarding the nutrition. Yes, actually, it's like in addition to the bringing of the child itself, the nutrition also play a role in just the qualities of the person itself. Like now, with more of those chronic diseases now people are facing. Yes, it could be in the gene itself, but people with their own lifestyle, especially the health lifestyle, this kind of gene, it may not be awakened. So, like, if they tend to be, especially those who are now eating like those junk food or even more calories, as you say, definitely with certain diseases it could happen. Mm-hmm. And also for the qualities, now certain qualities, I guess maybe you hear Dr. Joe Dispenza, you are the placebo, and also Wim Hof, that there a certain way for people in order to be trained. If you train yourself to gain certain qualities, especially like he's saying, for a very long period of time, we, through the way that we brought up, like we put ourselves in a certain comfort zone. So when we train ourselves and we find somebody who will help us in order to find our real qualities, we could change. And if it is not even somebody who will help us in order to change, at least being like in a sense like this library, reading more, definitely you will just have a plan or a strategy in order to make a future change. If it's not totally for yourself, even for the generation to come.
I agree. Genes don't put constraints on our self-improvement. We're all capable of that. Yeah.
So is there any e-service for searching for celebrity? You just write your characteristics.
Standards.
Standards. Just your standards, and they will matching e-service. They will matching with we will search and match with you. I think this from physiology, psychology doctor. He can make this search. He can a service, not just for teach to go to the e-service online and make all the study inside this to help people. So it's easy to find my women.
You know, there's no question psychotherapy is beneficial. I know there's a lot of stigma with mental health care in Kuwait, but that's unfortunate because there are a lot of people need mental health care and they don't have access to it here. And therefore they suffer needlessly.
I think in the website, it's easy. It's easy to make your study. Your study inside this website can make foreign and put this whole study for human, just for it.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, commenting on this comment later. Is it true that men tend to be more rational than women? And is it by nature or by nurture?
It's absolutely not true. No. There are differences between men and women in cognition and thinking. Women, by the way, tend to be better with language than men. You may have noticed women speak more fluently than men. They're less susceptible to language disorders like stuttering and dyslexia. Men tend to be better in some what are called visual spatial skills. This involves imagining how objects look at different perspectives. It involves mathematical abilities like geometry. Men tend to be better than that. But it's certainly not accurate to say women or men are more rational than women, even though probably commonly believed.
Yeah, it's a stereotype.
Stereotype, indeed. Yeah.
Is the male and female human brain evolved equally?
There are anatomical differences in the male and female brains. That's just true. By the way, women tend to have slightly smaller brains. Now, this does not mean that they have any less abilities or lower intelligence. But even when you adjust for body size, brains tend to be slightly smaller, but they process information differently. Women, there are the number of anatomical differences. In women, the tissue that connects the two halves of the brain is larger than men. Women tend to have more gray matter, men have more white matter in the brain, lots of differences. Women and men, there are lots of behavioral differences. They tend to express emotions differently. Women express emotions more freely than men, except for anger.
But as an organ, it's similar, just size difference.
No, there are other subtle differences as well.
As an organ?
Yeah.
By that, do you say that women are better off in management and politics than men?
Women relate to others differently than men. I would say both men and women are equally capable in management, politics, indeed, all pursuits.
But there are so many examples like now, internationally, like you see certain women, like you say before Margaret Thatcher, even now Angela Merkel, or now in UK, like Nicola Sturgeon, or Ruth Davidson, or just recently Theresa May, or before Hillary Clinton. So is that something genetic?
I think women, of course, today have more opportunities than men, or more opportunities than in the past. and they're fulfilling their potential more so than in the past. You know, in the past, success was in part due to labor and the ability to form alliances with others. And men had somewhat of an advantage in that, in as much as they have greater upper body strength. But today, you know, that's not an advantage any longer. So when you look at societies that have gender equality as enshrined in law, like Sweden, women are doing very well. Oh.
I read an article once that said that siblings have no more in common than people selected at random. Is this true?
Where did you read that?
It was this academic article about how Darwin's principles relate to the family structure, where the siblings like compete for their parents' resources and love.
Well, that's absolutely true. The personalities of siblings, brothers and sisters, are no more alike than people you just randomly select. Now, this makes no sense because siblings share 50% of the same genes and they share the same environment, the same household. And psychologists cannot understand why that's true. I'm sure none of you are like your brothers and sisters by and large. It doesn't make any sense. You were raised by the same parents in the same household, typically. You have genetic similarity. Why aren't you more similar? It's one of the great unanswered questions in my field, developmental psychology. Yep. Yeah.
You talk how fast affected our behavior. Talk about famine and food deprivation. How the world nowadays to an epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
But we never talked about the future. How the current situation, the world environment change. How would it affect the future behavior?
And in fact, no one knows. Most people think, most scientists think that we've interfered with evolutionary processes in the modern world. And this is, you know, we have the miracle of modern medicine. And mortality has been dramatically reduced. Infectious disease has been dramatically reduced. So what the future holds is just unknown.
So we cannot theoretically model a human behavior. We cannot model it.
We're absolutely terrible at predicting human behavior. The best predictor of how a person will behave is past behavior. But otherwise, we can't predict who's going to reoffend when they're released from prison. We can't predict who's going to be a Nobel Prize winner and who's going to be an unskilled laborer. Yep. Yeah.
Going back to her question where she stated that she read somewhere about how siblings don't have as much in common as strangers. Remember how just like a few minutes ago during your discussion you stated how genetically siblings will have things in common. They're more likely to be religious. So how don't these two facts? But you stated that siblings themselves would tend to be more religious, correct? Like if one sibling is religious, that runs in the family, from what I understood.
Yeah, I may have not explained this well. I was talking about identical twins who are genetic clones, share 100% of the same genes. They're astonishingly alike. But siblings are not. Mm-hmm.
Professor, this might be a bit far-fetched. I remember having a debate with a friend of mine about talent. Is talent something you can inherit or something you could learn? Is it biological or something you could gain through experience?
There are psychologists who study this, and unfortunately, I don't know a lot about it. I wish I could address that. I really don't know much about it. Yeah. I would like to think that practice results in talent.
My friend, she also studied Darwinian biology. She says, no, it's all genetics. I
would suspect for the most talented individuals, you need both. good genetics and good environment.
How heritable would you say narcissism is?
Narcissism.
If someone tells you that they think everyone else in their family is a narcissist, would this suggest that there's something off with that person as well?
You have experience with this? Some psychologists study narcissism and what's called Machiavellianism and all these negative personality traits. I'm just speculating. I hope I'm not talking about someone you know, but if someone is accusing everyone else of being a narcissist, that suggests it's due to their own limitations. Narcissism is rather rare. I do know that, what is it, like about 4% of the population has narcissistic personality disorder, including our president, President of the United States.
Is that really rare? That's 4 out of 100. That's pretty common.
Well, I suppose it is. I've known some narcissists as well. Narcissists, these are people who love themselves. They have to get attention. They have to be the center of attention. They think that their abilities are better than everyone else. They're very annoying people.
Is personality fixed? I read somewhere that once you reach around your mid-20s, your personality can't change after that. However, your personality does develop as you age. Is this correct?
Personality is highly heritable. About 60% of personality appears to be due to genetics. And what most parents will tell you is their son or daughter was born with the personality already intact. And indeed, they have to adapt their parenting to the personality of the child. Some personality does change modestly as we age, and indeed can change up through adulthood and late adulthood as well, but not dramatically.
Are you familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality? So could a person have a completely different personality type as they age? Let's say like you have like for example an INFJ. Could they go up to like an INFP? Could they change in their life? Is that possible?
I don't know those metrics.
Okay. So like would one personality type completely change into another, or would there be such minor differences that the person would not appear to be like a completely different person to like their surroundings, to the people that know them?
I do know that the older you get, the less personality changes. So in adulthood, personality would not change dramatically, certainly not to a different personality type. Yep, you're stuck with your personality.
So you don't have much control over it?
No, you do not. Well, it was really this was a great time. I was tired after work. I didn't think I would enjoy this, but it's actually been quite interesting. I appreciate the chance to come and talk with you. My name's James Rose, by the way. Thank you so much. Thank you.